Okay. This means the other alternates get appointed. Okay. All right. It's good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 6:30 p.m. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Merrimack Planning Board for Tuesday, November 1st, 2022. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. We have Jamie and Paul are absent as board members, and we need to appoint some alternates in for them. Barbara is also absent, but we're not permitted to submit an alternate for the town council rep. And so between Jamie Nelson and Maureen, does anybody have any strong preferences for voting position or non-voting? Is any volunteers to not vote tonight? Volunteer not to vote? Okay, so you two are in voting positions tonight. Thank you, Maureen, for doing that. We certainly will have a rotation through voting, but it will never be perfect because of the way the nights come up. So let's see, the usual announcements about microphones. Please make sure your microphone is turned on and you speak clearly into it. Please also ensure every applicant and speaking members of the public clearly identify yourselves for the record. The minutes are prepared from the recording, and so they need to be able to clearly hear your name when you identify yourself. Our next planning board meeting is currently scheduled for November 15th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. in the Matthew Thornton room, which is this room. That concludes the usual housekeeping items for a call to order. The next item on the agenda is the Planning and Zoning Administrator's Report. Tim, have you a report for us?
Just a very quick update. We are now in the second phase of our consideration of the vacancy for the assistant planner position. We have two candidates that have gone through the first interview. One has done the second interview and plan review exercise. The second is scheduled to do so tomorrow. Either one of them is probably going to require a little bit of additional training and time from Robert and I to bring them up to speed. But we do think we're probably going to be able to fill the position with one of the two candidates.
Okay, thank you for that. Do any members of the board have questions for Tim or his staff? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on the agenda to the consent agenda items. There's 3 items listed there. What's the will of the board with respect to the consent agenda? Somebody make a motion.
Also move we approve the consent agenda.
Motion by Lynn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Nelson.
Oh, I'm not on. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
you are.
Yeah, you're a voting member, so
Oh.
you can second it.
Okay. Well, that's right.
Just did that.
Sorry.
Okay, motion by Lynn, second by Nelson to approve the consent agenda. Just for clarity, as we are about to collect votes, I'm going to abstain on this one simply because the Gilbert Crossing project appears on the agenda, and I abstain on all of those. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Let's see, that makes 501 for the approval of the consent agenda. Item number 4 on our agenda is How Distribution LLC is the applicant and Utsi Properties MHT LLC as the owner. Continued review for final approval of a site plan review to construct a 340,000 square foot warehouse building and associated site improvements. The parcel is located on Crow's Nest Circle in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts, Tax Map 2D. Lot 21. It is Case Planning Board 2022-33, and it's continued from our October 4th, 2022 Planning Board meeting. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you recall, this project was initially before you back on October 4th. The applicant gave an overview of the project. At that point, we did not have peer review comments completed. The peer review has now been completed. The applicant has submitted revised plans. Following that peer review, it does Still have a fair amount of items that need to be addressed from both peer review and the staff review. However, there was nothing of any significance or anything that we thought would be a major roadblock that would prevent the planning board from taking a final decision here tonight. I would note that at this point, we're looking at the waivers. There are 5 waivers currently being requested for internal parking lot landscaping, tree setback from pavement, site distance, minimum pipe size, and locations of trees greater than 15 inches in diameter. Community development staff is comfortable with the 3 of those for the landscaping, tree setback, and the trees greater than 15 feet. We do not support the waiver for site distance, as we believe it's important to ensure the driveway will be safe not only for the applicant, but future development of the second lot in the subdivision, and that preserving adequate site distance is also a standard requirement of the individual operations and maintenance plans for each property, and will need to be an ongoing part of the annual site maintenance. Public Works does not have a specific recommendation regarding the pipe size waiver. However, they did note to staff that had this been a pipe in a public right-of-way or on a public property, that 15 would be the minimum acceptable pipe for such a situation. Other than that, we feel that if the board is comfortable at this point, that you could grant a conditional final approval. We'd go through the a second peer review to address those final comments and hopefully deal with the final parts of this at a staff level.
Okay. Thank you, Tim, for the summary. Please introduce yourself for the record and tell us where we're at with the project.
Good evening, Matt Ruthier for the applicant.
Ashok Rampuria, I'm the applicant.
Good evening, board members. Again, we are here again to discuss this warehouse project that was before you last meeting. We have done some adjustments and revisions and tried to address some comments as best we could in the limited time frame. Again, we are in front of you for an approval or conditional approval of the proposed warehouse project. Some of the comments that you folks had brought up in the last meeting, such as providing a truck turning plan, we did provide that in the most updated set. We did call out, I think, the walls a little more clearly with elevations and whatnot. We did put some signage to address truck access, as we had talked before, with the truck access being this southern entrance closest to Mass Road and the vehicular access being at the end of the cul-de-sac. We are asking for the additional waivers. We did look at the site distance, and we would just add that because of the speed that vehicles are approaching into this road, again, it not being a through street, reaction time is less reaction time is needed, which is typical of the site distance plan and profile. And we would also reiterate that, you know, the truck entrance being at the southern portion of the site, their sight line is actually going to be much higher in the air than the vehicles, which will be exiting the cul-de-sac. So if we'd be happy to address and or do the site distance plan and profile, if that's what the board's pleasure is, but we feel that, again, based on this road being only for this particular lot at this time, and the fact that a vehicle does need to slow down quite extensively as it enters into the cul-de-sac, that it's not really a what we would consider a safety issue.
Aren't site distances speed dependent?
Typically, yes.
So-
DOT recommends 400 feet site distance in either direction, obviously.
At what speed though?
That is, I believe, for 40
Miles per hour. So you'd have a shorter sight distance on your slower road because this doesn't have a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit,
correct.
right?
And obviously at the southern entrance, we're pretty much looking at Mass Road. And then obviously at the cul-de-sac portion, they have the whole road worth of length. So
Okay.
that's,
I can see
How-
Tim looking in the book. I wanted somebody to confirm for me that site distances were speed dependent, but assuming that they are, then whatever you would have to show on the plan would be decreased because you're obviously a low speed limit road. Right.
I mean, we would anticipate we'd be into maybe 10 miles an hour on this road simply because of the size, the size of the vehicles, the fact that it's at a dead end cul-de-sac.
So Crow's Nest Circle is a public road, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And
And
what's
would be
its-
based off the speed limit of the road, which the town standard speed limit is 30 miles an hour.
30 for anything unmarked? Yep. So what would the site distance requirement be for a 30-mile-an-hour road?
That is it would be the standard that is determined, I believe it's in our right-of-way permit regulations that the Public Works Department has. I don't have those specifically, they're referenced in the regulations, but we don't have a specific requirement.
But the necessary site distance changes based on the speed limit, is that true?
That's correct. It would be, I'm going back a few years to my previous job, but generally, I want to say for a 35-mile-an-hour road, you're looking for 300 to 350 feet of site distance, and it might be slightly less than that for 30 miles per hour.
What's the length of Crow's Nest Circle? The whole road?
I think it's a little over 1,000 feet to the end of the bulb.
Okay, so 300 feet is roughly going to be about a third the length. Okay. Whether you have 300 feet or not, I think the board could consider whether it wanted to grant a waiver of that requirement. But as far as showing it on the plan,
Without seeing it,
That's
we
sort of
don't
the-
know what the
we
site
don't know
distance
whether
available
we're
is.
compliant or not.
Correct. That's the reason we're not supporting the waiver, is we don't know what that distance is actually available there.
I think when we get to the point of talking about waivers, yeah, you'll have an opportunity to sort of present whatever the best argument you want, and the board will, hear you and I'm sure have questions and proceed
Sure.
from there.
Again,
Sorry for the
we
interruption.
did go in front of the Conservation Commission. We did get some of their comments again regarding using straw instead of hay. No, I think it was the fertilizer requirement,
No phosphate.
no phosphate. And I believe I think addressed most of those or caught all those that were calling out those particular items. And again, not much has changed from what we had before as far as the overall site layout and everything is still the same. Again, we've added some signage, directional signage, stating no trucks on the end of the access to the site at the cul-de-sac. And demarcating truck entrance on the southern portion, as well as adding additional signage on this corner end of the building to keep the trucks from obviously trying to go around there unless it was an emergency fire situation. So again, everything as previously shown stayed the same, all underground stormwater systems minus the above ground pond we have at the southern end of the site. And again, septics, we have still not had any response from Penachuk. We've been in contact with them from the beginning of this project to do some pressure tests and whatnot, but we still have not got any response from them directly.
What was the Penachuk's role in your septic plan?
Well, Penachuk will be supplying the water. They've also got this water line easement that runs through the back of the property. And that is a 12-inch, I believe, running through there. And our intent, obviously, is to connect to their line. So we'll need to meet their requirements.
Oh, for water service. I thought you were still telling something to do with your septic system.
No, I was just stating that we're still obviously going to be on septic as well.
Okay,
So on-site wastewater.
thank you.
We have added one additional change is we have added some green in this area in a shape of an island, breaking up the parking. So our waiver request for green space has gone down slightly in one portion, which would be based on the southern parking area calculation.
Anything else you'd like to present to us?
I know there was some discussion about wall height. We have looked at that. Obviously, I believe it's more of an interpretation of the base below grade level of the wall and the top of the wall. So we've got to do a couple of minor adjustments, but that we don't see an issue meeting that requirement.
So your plans to lower the height of the wall to satisfy the community development department's
Yes.
interpretation of the reg?
Yes.
Okay.
It's roughly about, with the type of wall we're proposing, it's roughly an 8-inch difference with the base block being buried. So that's how it's considered height-wise. It's from what's the buried block.
Okay.
Top.
That makes sense. Anything else? Oh, sorry, Lynn, go ahead.
Matt,
Yes.
when you were talking about landscaping and parking, you've got 3 island sets of parking. And you said you're gonna do some landscaping on the middle one. Is that eliminating that parking?
No, we ended up creating, let me just kind of get to a point where you can see it a little better here.
You're just putting green stuff.
Yeah, we're
In between the
adding
noses
green
of the
space.
door.
It's breaking it up. It's helping
Okay.
us also to capture, break up some of the runoff that was originally coming across this whole parking lot.
So that,
So we've added this island right here.
and that's gonna have green stuff in it.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
How much area is there to plant
Yeah.
bushes and
It's
trees?
like a foot or two.
I can measure it and tell you actually.
Doesn't look very big.
Yeah, it's probably about 4 or 5 feet is my guess. Based on that,
How long's the parking space?
18 feet long is the
18, okay,
parking,
so
yeah.
that's about right. Yeah,
9 by
okay.
18, so
Okay.
looks to be about half that.
So what's new is the strip of green grass or whatever it will be that's in the fronts of where the cars park, not the things at the end of the.
Correct, not
Aisles.
not the terminal islands. That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Anything else that you'd like to present to us as a part of the update?
Again, we've used the biggest trucks of W65s and have done, included a truck turning plan, which I believe the board had asked about before. Again, our, these, truck turning are usually pretty, yeah.
Yep.
But we have broken out the truck entering and exiting, and obviously, these are WE67s, which are, interstate hauler trucks as the worst case scenario.
Thank you.
Yep.
Does the board have any questions of the applicant in terms of what they've presented? And then we'll start talking about specific waivers and. No?
Well, just going back to the landscaping issue, I don't see this, I didn't see the landscaping that he's talking about on the plan. If you go back to the one with the landscape, you don't show any trees or bushes or shrubbery in those islands or end caps for that matter.
Yeah, we've called it green space because again, it's fairly minimal in nature as far as width. Trees don't typically do well in spaces
Right.
5 feet or
I
under,
agree.
so we would probably do it'd be ground cover, either grass or some thing of that sort that would fill in that space.
So inside the interior of the parking lot, I do see a couple of trees at the end, the terminal ends, and then around the border. Can you walk us through what it is that you've got proposed for?
Sure. You're talking types of trees and
Generally the size.
yeah, well, I think the standard is again 3 to 3.5 calipers required for the trees. These are obviously in the islands here. We have provided shade trees.
Could you show those? I'm missing them. Oh, that one? Yeah.
So we've got one here, another one here.
Yeah.
These over here, and again we're surrounding pretty much the whole parking going along based on the number of parking spaces. So we have some evergreens obviously up in here. But the majority of these are gonna be, you know, evergreen, I mean, deciduous trees that create some kind of shade along the edge of the parking. And most of them are again, salt tolerant species that are, salt and drought tolerant.
Now, I was reading the note that you added regarding snow maintenance, and it talked about, you know, snow storage and trucking it off site and all that. And the note wasn't really clear on the screen, the video screen, about the no salt or the Snow Pro. Can you find that note for me again? I think that was on your overall site plan.
Yes, I think so.
It was
I think yeah, I think it was separate down
yeah,
here.
there it is to the right. So for parcels within the Aquifer Conservation District or wellhead protection area, no salt or chemical deicers are to be used for winter maintenance, and winter maintenance shall be performed by a Green Snow Pro contractor. Are you within the Aquifer Conservation and wellhead protection area
Yes.
for this? I think you are.
Wellhead, no. Aquifer, yes.
Okay. So you're gonna have a no salt limitation on the site. And no de-icing no salt or other de-icing chemicals on the site. I'm certainly glad that the trees that you're picking are salt resistant, but shouldn't be an issue for that. Nelson, did you have other questions?
Not on this particular subject. I don't think much of that landscaping plan, but that's not a question.
Well, you know, it's a worthwhile comment, obviously. I think that, you know, if we were looking at a building that had some significant public face, I would have more interest in detail into the landscaping plan. But yeah, down at the bottom of this road, where it's virtually the last, not virtually, it is the last thing that you see before you cross over into the sewer treatment plant. And I don't know that necessarily the choice of landscaping is particularly important there, but
Understand.
at least some. Other members of the board with comments or questions? Right.
So I see this abuts the railroad. Have you given any thought to adding a switch for rail access for freight to this location?
No, that was not any part of a discussion. Obviously, you can see pretty much the width of the railroad right away and where it jogs further to the south. Obviously, their track is aligned center to that, so whatever they choose to do as far as making adjustments or widening that is falls within that right away.
Mhm.
But we have not looked at that. I mean, anything's possible in the future, but it wasn't considered with this.
Okay. That's it for me.
Other questions, comments?
I have some
Nelson?
other questions, but they're more general.
Have at it.
Did we ever have anything that describes what materials are going to be stored in this warehouse? What we're going to be using it for, and how those get into the jurisdiction of the fire and other interested parties in town, depending on what we're storing in here? I didn't see any description of what was planned to be stored here. It's just a warehouse, and
I think what the applicants shared with us so far is that may not be known, or they may not know exactly who that occupant would be. Obviously, I think if they were to have, you know, storage of some harsh chemicals or flammables or something like that, it would involve the interests of the fire department. I don't know exactly what the mechanism
Through the
is for that.
permitting process for any tenant fit up or occupancy, that would be something that the fire department would be part of their review.
could we have a note on the plan that said that? I think that's probably a good way to handle it, but
That would say that
That they have to follow our regulations that are already in place.
yeah.
okay, other comments or questions? Okay, let's walk through some of your waiver requests. Which one do you want to deal with first?
I guess we'll go with the internal parking lot landscaping first.
Okay. So that's a waiver from section 3.11.I.1.
Yep,
Or L.1, I take that back. That's a
L.1.
lowercase l.
no, it's I. It's an I.
And 3.11L1 I1. 3, the tree setbacks from the pavement. Let's deal with those two together. Internal parking lot landscaping and tree setback from the pavement. What are the
I would
requirements?
recommend you do the 3 that include also the trees greater than 15 inches, identifying all of those on the site.
Number 4.
Oh, okay, so the fourth one.
Those are all 3 that staff supports, given the location and nature of the project.
Okay. So what's required of the internal parking lot landscaping and what are you providing?
Let me just jump back to the landscape plan because that has obviously changed here.
Yep.
So the breakdown is based on kind of the front parking lot, which again is the area to the, I guess it would be west. Where we're required 10% is required, and we're at 8.8% or 835 square feet less than what's required.
Okay.
The north parking area would be the end at the far end of the building where the truck parking is. And again, we're at 7% where 8 is required, or 145 square feet less.
Okay. Now, what's required of the tree setback from pavement section?
That would be 5 feet.
And what are you going to provide?
I believe we have 10 feet between pretty much the edge of the pavement and the retaining wall, or the property line. The retaining wall is slightly off of that, but we have a guardrail right at the edge of the bituminous curb. So those trees, in essence, the 5 feet is to protect the trees from, being hit by vehicles and snowplows, obviously, because of the situation along Crow's Nest Circle and the minimal area. The trees will be protected as they'll be behind the guardrail. So the 5 feet kind of becomes a moot point.
I understand. How close are they going to be feet wise?
I would say they're probably, if we are at 10 feet, 8, probably about 4.
Okay.
From
Do you have
the
any
back
concerns that the trees being closer to the pavement will cause the trees to damage your pavement?
Not based on the type of soils we have out there. They're pretty loosely graded. We don't have a particular concern. The trees that are located on that portion of the site where it's tighter are smaller species.
Smaller species with less extensive root systems.
Certainly makes a lot of sense to me. I just want to make sure you understand the expectation is that you'll maintain the number of parking spaces that are part of your site plan, and that they'll be useful and they won't be in disrepair or end up being snow storage because nobody parks in them because whatever. And as long as you're comfortable with that, I don't know if the board has other questions about the distance from the pavement. What's the requirement for the 15-inch trees?
That requirement is that the applicant has to identify all trees on the site that are over 15 inches in diameter. Given the size and nature of the site, that would be an extraordinary expense to go out and identify all those trees.
Where generally are the trees existing trees located that are of that size? Are they in that front?
They're from what my experience being on site and doing a lot of the test fitting and whatnot. There's a few on the front end where there was piles of fill or older sections, and then there was more, I guess, to the north. along this edge, because this whole property, as you can see, based on the underlying image, you can see the path through here. So this was logged, I believe, back in 2008 or somewhere around there. So it had been cleared before. So the size of the trees that are there currently are, most of them are not even close to 15 inches.
Okay, certainly understand that. Won't you have to get an AOT permit for this?
Yes.
Aren't they gonna make you map your trees?
They will not make us locate 15-inch trees, or they typically have us locate the limits of the trees, not the size.
Okay. Now, the trees that we're talking about, or the limits of the trees, either one of those things, is existing conditions. None of that's gonna remain on the site, correct?
Correct. We are pretty much impacting to property line to property line.
Is there any existing undisturbed forested area that will remain?
Maybe a very small portion up on this corner near the existing water line easement.
Okay. Is there any existing undisturbed area that you are committed to leaving there, or are you just there might be some, or there might not?
There might be some. We're not necessarily sure. Again, with that water line easement going through there, the Pennachuck is going to make sure that nothing grows through there anyways.
With that in mind, I certainly don't see any need for us to have you map out trees that are going to be removed. With that, board members, do you have questions about the 3 landscape waivers that have been discussed?
Could you enumerate them again, please?
Sure. Do you want me to read the section numbers or just tell you what they're about?
1, 2, and 4.
One, two,
The 3 waivers are
okay. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Okay.
internal parking lot landscaping,
Yeah.
the minimum setback of the trees from the pavement, and the location and identification of trees greater than 15 inches in diameter.
Okay. We're not talking about.
We're
the
not
site-
talking about site distance or the pipe size at this
Yeah.
point.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Does that make sense? Okay. Does anybody have
Yeah.
questions about the waivers that we've asked about? Okay.
Whoever
As
makes
any-
the motion, please make sure you add your justification for the 2 statutory criteria.
Is someone willing to make a motion related to those 3 waivers?
I would motion to approve those 3 waivers due to being an undue burden on the applicant. Go specific circumstances.
Specific circumstances for the site plan or conditions of the land indicate that the waiver will properly carry out the spirit and intent of the regulation. Is there a second for Brian's motion?
I'll second.
Second by Lynn or Helene or Neil?
You.
Neil?
You.
All right, we'll count Neil as the second.
I got it. Okay. You got it.
For a second, can you talk a little bit louder? I'm not hearing the whole.
Certainly try. I'll bring my microphone a little closer. Should be amplified.
I'm sorry you had to speak out of line, but I'm not hearing everything that everyone is saying about particular waivers or the numbers on the waivers.
We'll certainly do our best to make sure the microphones are closer to us. Thank you, sir, for raising the issue. If there's no further discussion on granting these 3 waivers, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? So we have 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes. And no opposed, no abstaining. 6-0-0. Okay, let's talk about the site distance waiver, or there's 2 of them actually.
The site distance is one waiver, the second
Oh,
one is
pipe
the
size.
pipe size for the drainage.
Okay, let's talk about the site distance waiver. Are you asking, well, I guess you're asking for both to not show the site distance measurement and then also not be held to having enough site distance per the requirement.
I mean, I would state this. We've looked at the site distance. We have plenty of site distance. We've got some minor changes that we need to do as far as the site distance looking from this truck driveway across, simply because it crosses our wall on 2 spots. We don't have any problem with it either direction. Again, we can produce them. We're just of the thought that, again, because of the type of road and the speed of vehicles on this road, that it's not necessarily a safety issue, as typically it's a matter of being able to see something to stop.
So I hear you when you say that you've got the sight distance that you need and particularly at a slow speed. But without putting it on the plan, I don't know how much sight distance you have. Maybe you've got 1,000 feet, or maybe probably don't, but
What we've run it for at this current point is a standard 400 feet, so that you can see the 2 foot clear, wide open sight line in either direction. Obviously, there is no direction at the end of the
So
cul-de-sac.
if you've done the work of running it, why can't we see it?
We are asking for a waiver. If the board's pleasure is for us to show it, then we will obviously produce it.
If you have it and you meet the standard, that's the easiest way. Just put it on the plan. If you don't have 400 feet and you need us to consider giving you a waiver from that standard, then let's talk about that.
And I don't know that 400 is necessarily the
Or
number.
yeah,
here.
right. That
That's
might not be true.
correct.
Correct. Whatever the necessary number is.
If they know what it is, put it on the plan.
We can withdraw that waiver. We're fine with that.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't want to withdraw it, we can vote on it, but I think you might get the sense where that's going to go. It might be better to withdraw it.
I think we'd like to withdraw that one.
Thank you.
Withdraw that one. Okay.
Good move. Yeah.
I think the 15-inch pipe size. I think. What do you have? A 12-inch pipe that you're going to use?
We have a 15-inch out in the right of way.
Yeah.
The existing drainage on this road is rather strange. It's small. It's a smaller 12-inch. I don't know how it became to that point. We're using a lot of 12-inch to begin with at the beginning of our drainage runs, simply because we're filling this whole front of the site roughly 5 feet to get everything up higher.
Yeah.
And it's relatively flat. Our pipes are running flat, and pretty much everything that's running to the basin on the south side is building up in, and these pipes are acting as somewhat of extensions for a short period of time, just with the storm run, depending on the storm. The requirement is a 25-year storm for industrial, I believe. And so in order to keep the pipe shallow, based on cover, we've gone with a smaller pipe at the beginning, and then obviously it gets larger as more drainage combines. We're increasing pipe size, but we'd like to be able to keep the 12-inch again, because it's all on site, and there's nothing in the right of way that's under 15. We provide a 15-inch
I got
inlet.
Did our
That's
peer
about
review folks pick up on the issue or suggest that a 12-inch pipe would not function?
No, they just
Sufficiently?
pointed out the regulatory requirements.
So it's a regulatory requirement, but functionally, all the engineers think it'll work.
There was
Function-
no, I was going to say, based on the peer review, there does not appear to be any functional drainage issue because of the pipe size.
Sounds like a perfect candidate for a waiver to me. If Nelson,
Ms. He did say that it was sized for a 25-year storm. Is that correct? And that's based on a 25-year storm?
That is what the town requirement is for
That's
this
what our
type
regs
of
require.
development, yes.
And do you have to look at a 50-year storm, or did
We've
you?
looked at the 50 to make sure nothing tops out of the structures and whatnot, and we don't have any particular issue with anything coming out of the catch basins. That's typically how you look at it, is how much in a 50-year, if it was to pond outside of that catch basin top.
There's a sufficient freeboard for the 50-year storm.
Is it,
There's sufficient freeboard, that space, to make
Yeah.
sure that it doesn't
Yeah.
overtop in the 50-year storm.
okay.
the pipe
Okay.
dimension's a different question because it's depends on how fast you get your 50-year storm. But either way, our engineers are not citing it as being a problem for
Yeah.
performance.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions about the pipe size waiver, folks? If not, is someone willing to make a motion to either grant or decline the waiver?
I'll make a motion.
All right, Jim, what's your motion?
that we accept the waiver.
Okay.
Under criteria, strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and the waiver would not be contrary to the spirit or intent of the regulation.
Thank you, Neil. Is there a second for Neil's motion?
I'll second.
Second by Brian. Further discussion? If there's none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 to grant that waiver. Okay, so we've granted 4 waivers and one of them was withdrawn. I believe we have not yet held any public hearing. Are there any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in on this application?
Like to, but it might consume so much time that, you know, how many hours do you want me to talk about?
Well, we certainly don't want hours of comments, but if you have something that you'd like the board to know. Excuse me?
5 minutes wouldn't handle what I gotta say about it.
Well, I don't necessarily have a time limit for you, but if you've got something relevant to our regulations that you'd like the board to know, here's your chance.
Just,
You got to come to a microphone if you want to do that and introduce yourself.
I think they've already compromised themselves already
Okay.
by approving Cruz.
You got to be at a microphone if you want to address the board. You got to come up to this microphone.
I'm not going to the microphone.
Okay,
You can
then
hear me clearly.
that's it. Thank you for offering up the
Like I said,
suggestion.
it would take hours, and I can't stand up there for hours because I have a disability for
Yep.
standing.
I'd gladly offer you the seat up here at the desk if you want that.
Sure, sure. Wouldn't all the way right back to 15-inch trees. You know, I mean,
You got to come to the microphone if you want to offer up a comment. Glad to receive whatever you want the board to know, but I can't do it if you're not at a microphone.
My name's Philip Galt. I live on Meeting House Road and
Philip, what was your last name? I didn't catch it.
Gault.
Galt.
Yeah, Philip. Last time I checked, it was. Yeah.
Excellent.
But
So tell us what you want to know. What you want us to know.
the one that he withdrew, why? What is the deal with him withdrawing that? What, 400 feet? Well, I didn't quite understand that whole situation. Why did all of a sudden he withdrew?
I appreciate the fact that you want to ask questions. This is your opportunity to provide comment to us.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, let him build it. If you think that's the right thing to do, I understand Anheuser-Busch's wells have already been contaminated. You want to contaminate more groundwater? Be my guest. That's about all I got to say.
But thank you for your comments.
Yeah, that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Are there any other abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Board members, do you have further discussion items for the applicant? If not, board members, are you prepared to take final action on the application? Nelson?
Just a
good?
reminder that whoever makes the motion, we need to do the finding first, which should be framed in the memo. In this case, just as a reminder, the motion would be to find that with the granted waivers and proposed conditions of approval, that the application meets the applicable regulatory requirements necessary, and then conditional approval.
Where is that written down?
In the recommendation part of the memo.
Page 2, a little bit,
Oh, yeah.
a few
Thank
inches
you.
down.
Thank you.
Bold print.
Okay. Okay.
Nelson, were you looking to make a motion?
I was, but I had one other comment first. Well, yes, I wanted, okay, I can do that because, okay.
You have a comment you want to make first? Go ahead.
Well, it ties in with the motion. You see, I think we should put on the plan somewhere a note that the materials that are stored in this warehouse should be in accordance with the town regulations and so on. So that
Okay.
this is going to be parceled out to a bunch of different persons. And I think they should be made aware as they come into this place that they have to have permission to store certain materials, or they have to have the town's permission to store whatever they're storing there. Okay.
I think there's some level of town approval. I'm not sure if it's quite as in-depth as you suggest, but I'm fine with the note. I mean, make the motion that
Yeah.
you do whatever you want your motion to do, subject to that condition.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do. If I can read all of this, I will make a motion to approve the plan. Make finding that there were general granted waivers and the proposed conditions of approval that the application meets all applicable regulatory requirements necessary, and to grant conditional final approval to the application with the following precedent conditions to be fulfilled within 6 months and prior to plan signing. And add to those things, the
note you discussed.
the one thing I discussed. I have one other comment. Under those recommendations, item number 6, if you go down that list that's there, it says the applicant shall, and then it's blank, and then it says any forthcoming. There's a word left out there.
It says very clear on mine, the shall address the forthcoming competence fire department relative to the site design necessary for finals.
The word address is missing from the copy we had.
There's a word missing
Okay.
from my copy.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
let me collect up a second for your motion before we
Okay.
move on to the comments.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Is there a second? Halim seconds the motion. Okay. Now comment on it as you please.
Okay.
Noted.
So my thoughts on the tenants that they potentially get would be like, for instance, like I did a deal where we put a guy who was going to store batteries in a building. And so we had to work with the building owner and the local fire department to make
Yeah.
sure that the fire suppression system would handle, a battery exploding essentially.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I think it's duplicative, but if we want to do it, that's fine.
okay.
Lots of our notes are
Yeah.
redundant on some other things that are already
Yeah.
parts of our regulations.
Yeah, I
too,
just
so.
wanted to be sure it got covered because
Yep.
it's the kind of thing that can get forgotten in 5 years and other staff members might overlook that. So with the note on the plan, I feel better.
There you go. Okay. Other comments on the note or anything else with respect to approval? So, my own comment is I think it's a good project for the site, and I think it does meet all of our regulatory requirements, which is a good finding. With that in mind, if there's no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 to grant conditional final approval subject to all the things discussed.
Who seconded? Did you second?
Halim seconded it.
Yeah, okay.
Second, offered the second for it. Okay. Item 5 on our agenda is Ultimate Bimmer Service as the applicant and BTC Realty LLC as the owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of a site plan to construct an automobile dealership and repair facility. The parcel's located at 106 Herrick Street in the C2 General Commercial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. Tax map 3D2, lot 21, case planning board 2022-39. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This project will be familiar to a lot of you. This was a project that was originally granted conditional approval by the board in December of 2020, before it was ultimately withdrawn by the applicant. The applicant has also then come back to the board and recently received approval for the construction currently going on at the former DCU on DW Highway for their facility there. The applicant has decided to come back and resurrect this project on Herrick Street. The submission is essentially bringing back the conditionally approved plan from 2020. There are a couple of items. First, that the plan is showing some landscaping in the right-of-way adjacent to Herrick Street. And if you recall, the applicant was requested to seek permission from Public Works to allow that. Public Works is amenable to these plantings as long as the site distance is not impeded, and that DPW is going to assume no responsibility for the maintenance of those landscaping materials. Staff also notes that there's still the issue with the proposed improvements within an NHDOT slope easement. This concern was never fully addressed before the withdrawal, and the applicant has since expressed optimism to us that they can obtain the written concurrence from DOT, but that will still need to be something that's resolved before any final action is taken in signing the plans. So, like I said, it should be familiar. We are asking the board to reconsider and grant the waivers that were previously granted because this is considered a new application at this point. We do note that the waiver regarding the trees greater than 15 inches in diameter probably isn't applicable anymore because the site was clear cut following the original approval. So we probably, I know Robert has a couple of conditions in the plans to address some of the changes that have happened in the interim since 2020 to address some of those issues with existing condition versus what the existing condition was prior to 2020. So with that, we'd certainly turn it over to the applicant.
All right. Please introduce yourself and tell us about the project. I know this is one we've seen before, but I do want to treat it as a new application, so kind of start from the beginning, but also make sure you call specific attention to whatever's different from last time to this time if you can.
Sure. Hi, I'm Jeff Cavan with TF Moran's office. We're the survey civil engineer on the project. So there really haven't been any changes. We've worked at a couple of the conditions, but as far as what you've seen, the project is what was previously approved. So again, it's map 3D2, lot 21, 106 Herrick Street. It's an acre and a half. It's in the general commercial district and the aquifer conservation district. We're proposing a one-story, 9,459 square foot car dealer and maintenance service station type facility. We did receive special exceptions from the ZBA in August of 2020 to allow the uses on this property. The building and what have you complies with all setbacks and your requirements. The utilities, we're proposing to bring sewer down from the King Street area here, gravity sewer down and tie in. And we're proposing to extend water from here down into the site, and we've been asked to extend it down to this corner of the intersection.
Okay.
There have been numerous applications before where they were hoping that they could get a loop tied into this to backfeed and loop that system. But the applicant had agreed to that. There's Liberty Utilities in the street and Eversource Electric. Parking requirements, we're required to have 64 parking spaces. We have 84, but roughly 20 of those are display inventory type spaces. So we're about 4 or 5 spaces greater than we need from the regular standpoint. One of the waivers we'd asked for, or the waiver we're requesting, is for interior landscaping. Interior landscaping, to me, works, but the regulation applies best when you have multiple rows of parking, and I can actually get landscaping internally. So we conform on, I think, in the front area, but on the sides, we're short. The requirement is 2,422 square feet, and we have about half that, 1,223 square feet. We would have to start adding islands, in the middle of this, which are problematic from a plowing standpoint and maintenance standpoint. So, it would create difficulties within. We would have to take out a significant number of spaces in here just to create landscape.
Staff would just note that waiver was granted previously in the original approval. The other thing to remember with this site is if you're on DW Highway, it's kind of in a bowl. So you're going to be seeing above those trees and landscaping regardless from DW.
So
what we had done with this landscaping, so we supply the number and size of trees that are required within there. We just don't have additional green space in these areas. So you can see we've planted trees completely around the development. This area, the board had actually raised the question of us cleaning up this corner at Herrick Street and DW Highway. And so this wasn't our idea, but we agreed to do that. So you can see we've put kind of some focal point shrubs and trees on the corner, and a couple other shade type trees, and then one other little cluster of shrubs and trees as you come in, and the rest of it would be lawn, and they would agree to maintain that. So from the waiver standpoint, we've asked for an area reduction, but we have supplied all the trees and shrub numbers that are required in your regulations.
As we stated back in 2020, the design intent is certainly met here. It's just the specific circumstances as a hint for whoever's making the motion.
Thank you for that,
So-
Tim.
Stormwater, what we're proposing to do is we're calling for an underground system here, a storm tech system. We are placing gas oil separator hoods in the structures at either end as the water enters so that we would capture anything that would come off. Tremendous soils on the property, so we're infiltrating most of the runoff. Right now, like Tim said, this is kind of a bowl. There's a low pocket here and a low pocket on either side of the property. Everything makes its way to an 18-inch pipe that crosses there. So we've made sure we've decreased or equaled the runoff pre to post for all storms up through the 50-year storm event. Like I said, most of the stormwater is treated and infiltrated here. The storm tech system has an isolator row that captures sediments and what have you, as well as we call for the usual 3-foot sumps in the structures to, again, collect that. We had submitted, we do have a maintenance plan on sheet 15 pertaining to this. We had done a full maintenance and operations. My guy didn't submit it, but we'll provide that. And that calls for, sweeping of the parking lots, cleaning out the sumps. And this is something that the state and the towns with MS4 programs are requiring. I've gone over sewer, water. We'd submitted a traffic report previously. Basically, what it came down to is they're looking at roughly 28 new trips AM peak, 32 PM peak, and 28 midday Saturday peak. This plays out to about one trip for every 2 minutes or so. This fits into the reason it's looked at as being not significant is that it fits into the typical background growth that you would see on the roadway of this caliber. The intersection of DW Highway has wide shoulders on either side and a center two-way left turn lane that will facilitate the traffic in and out of Herrick Street. So we didn't see any issue from the traffic standpoint. Lighting, we've called for maximum 20-foot high light poles with completely shielded, downcast shoebox type lights. So the lights is directed onto the pavement. And same thing for the building mounted lights. They're 15 feet high, but they're completely shielded and downcast. Landscaping, I showed you. I think the other, the DOT, so what we're talking about when they built DW Highway, they had a slope easement that extended onto the property. I had met with and talked with Brian DeFosis from District 5 DOT, illustrated that anything we're doing on site has no, doesn't affect the structural integrity of their road or have any impact on that roadway. He had some comments on drainage that we'll address, and I will get a letter from him to provide to the town. Sidewalks had come up previously. When that was discussed, there are no sidewalks on Herrick Street, or DW Highway, and at the time it was agreed that there really was no place for someone to walk in this location or a reason to have a sidewalk. So it's up to the board to have that discussion. So I will answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for the presentation. Board members, the first task before us is determining completeness. Does the board have any questions for the applicant related to the information submitted and whether it's complete?
Just one question, Mr. Chairman. I didn't find the lighting plan in my package. Is it there and I missed it, or was one not submitted? You know,
At least it's in the full package.
Should be sheet L1, which is the second to last sheet in the plan set, Nelson.
got it. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. No further questions on that, Mr.
And
Chairman.
I did bring some 11 by 17s of the architectural elevation if you want to see it.
Yes, we will want that. I think we
I
want
do
that
wanna
to be
see it.
part of the submittal.
Yeah,
we
if you
hand
want to
that
pass
out?
those around, please do. One of the questions that I have is sort of how does this site relate to the other site at the former DCU bank site? And are they going to be in common ownership and work in some harmonious way, or are they just two separate businesses that are?
The owner's still determining. Right now,
Okay. Once we have a quick look at it, we'll pass one down to Tim for his
Does
stuff.
look familiar. Yeah.
Is this the same architectural elevations that we saw before?
Yep.
Yeah, it looks familiar.
What's the will of the board with respect to the question about whether the application is complete? Nelson,
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to accept the plan as complete.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to find the application complete. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 700 or 6600. I'm sorry, 600 for completeness. The applicant has requested two waivers. One, the parking lot landscaping, and the other is this depiction of 15-inch trees. Perhaps we can take them up together. But the staff has recommended that the identification of 15-inch trees may not be necessary anymore. Tim, the only question that I have is, I can't recall this question of identifying 15-inch trees coming up in other applications ever in the
Comes
history
up all
of the
the
world.
time.
Yeah, it comes up in every application.
It's part of the regulations that were adopted by the board in 2019. This was not a requirement prior to 2019, but it is now.
Sure. So are applicants providing that in our plans, and we're just not calling attention to it, or have they been
If
asking
they
for these
meet the
waivers?
requirement, then we don't call it out. If they don't, then we tell them they need to ask for a waiver.
Getcha. I don't think that I've considered a waiver on this one
You
before.
actually do it every time for every Flatley project that's come in, they've asked for the waiver,
Yeah, I don't vote on those.
which you don't vote on.
I don't vote on those. Okay. Thank you for the clarification on that. And see, it's no question too dumb, right? Board members, if you're inclined to agree with the staff that because the site's been clear cut, that this waiver is no longer needed for the 15-inch one, that's certainly fine. And if not, then you can certainly vote on it and decide what to do with the waiver. There won't be any trees shown up on a plan no matter what you decide, because they're not there. If you prefer, we can just deal with the parking lot landscaping standard waiver. Is there discussion about that waiver? If not, is the board willing to make a motion on the waiver?
I will move that we grant the waiver on section 3.11.1 point L.1, Roman numeral 2, regarding the parking lot landscaping to the specific circumstances relative to site plan or conditions of the plan and such. I'm sorry.
You've never been on for the whole thing.
Yeah, all right. I move that we grant the waiver on section 3.11.I.1. Roman numeral 2 regarding the parking lot landscaping, subject to the specific circumstances relative to the site plan or conditions of the land and such site plan indicate that the waiver will properly carry out the spirit and intent of the regulations.
Is there a second for Lynn's motion?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. If there's discussion, if not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 to grant the waiver. Let's see. Does the board have any general discussion items with the applicant for the proposal? Nelson?
I do, Mr. Chairman. On page, the recommendation letter from the staff, on page 3, item 4, says the applicant shall address comments from the town's peer review consultant, Besson O'Neill, and any final review comments from the peer review following conditional approval as applicable. Can you tell us what those might be, Tim?
Off the top of my head, no, but they're basically addressing the peer review comments go back to 2020 when this was originally done.
Yeah.
So it's making sure that all of those that you granted based on that are addressed before you sign the plan. They're, I couldn't tell you off the top of my
Couldn't tell
head
me
what they are.
were.
But again, you granted it subject to that same condition previously.
Okay. And the other thing I wanted to ask about was this business of non-shrink mortar in the sewer line. I guess that's a standard thing that we require. And this is item, again,
The Public
page
Works comment, yep.
3. What?
That Public Works wastewater comment.
Yeah, number 8A, yeah. And,
So our detail needs to be updated.
okay,
So, sewer drainage, you'll see the boot that's fabricated into the structure.
Yeah.
And that we just have to correct that.
okay, so you have no problem with that? The one other thing was, did we trace this drainage, new drainage line that you put in from the outfall from your site as to where it goes?
It basically, so there's an 18-inch pipe
Yeah,
that just crosses and daylights on the
Yeah.
opposite side of Herrick Street.
yeah,
Again, and so the numbers are, the rate of runoff is pretty small. I mean, it's like 1 or 2 CFS that goes to that and leaves the site. We're making sure that we have not increased that. In most of the storms, we decrease it slightly. And the way we're doing that is we're infiltrating the majority of the runoff within the system.
but of what goes off your site, do you know that it goes to the river, obviously, apparently?
Yeah, we didn't trace it any
You
further.
don't know where it goes from there, yeah,
No.
and assume that that's good enough line, yeah.
Well, I guess what's the landowner's responsibility?
Yeah.
We have runoff that's sheeting off Daniel Webster Highway onto this site, and, the landowner is responsible to deal with that, right? That's an existing situation. So, basically, we're maintaining the same flow pattern and rate that exists today when we're finished is what we target, so that we don't change that and we don't affect the guy downstream of us or off our site.
That's my
That is
concern,
our
yeah.
goal. Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to ask the question. I don't have an answer, but, okay.
Other comments or questions?
Quick question.
Right.
Obviously this site's pretty sunken in. Have you guys decided where you're gonna put like a pylon sign, or are you gonna do something that sticks up into the air,
He was just gonna use the building mounted
the
signage.
building itself?
Yeah.
If you look at one of these pictures.
We did show,
you see
yeah,
it.
actually,
yeah,
we
you
did
can see
show
it,
a
you can see it.
sign
I was
Yeah.
just curious.
right there.
Yeah.
Maureen, you had a question?
Thanks. I just have a question on page 2. It speaks about before there was not a requirement for a sidewalk, but it's about up to the discretion of the board. I know that Nelson's been really working on sidewalks, and we like having them, so I don't know if that's anything that the board wanted to
It
talk
wasn't that it wasn't required. It was under these regulations. The board made the determination in 2020 that one was not required here.
Thank you.
Yeah, the problem being, Maureen, that it doesn't connect to any existing sidewalks on either side. Now, there is sidewalk on the opposite side of Route 3, but I don't know if we want to encourage people to cross at this point to get to the sidewalk on the other side.
In this particular section, I don't think that would be advisable.
you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how far where the sidewalk is in this. I know there is some up and down the street a little ways, but not right across the street.
No, it's fair amount.
There is just, so this is the parcel across from Citizens Bank,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? So,
the
'cause it
Citizens
does go
Bank.
down into a neighborhood, so that's what I was thinking, but,
I'd use the
That's
term
all.
loosely.
I'm sorry, what?
I'd use the term loosely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not actually. It's more business than neighborhood. It looks like down there.
Down there.
King Street Auto Body, Mike's Auto Body, Herrick Street. No,
And then the
there's
rest
not
are
really a
homes.
lot.
There are a couple of residential houses, but most of it is commercial.
Well, there's the whole,
The whole
New
Century
development.
Way neighborhood
yeah,
with,
yeah,
Well, yeah.
Canongate, what used to be Canongate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
That's
a
all. Thank you.
condominium type
Yeah.
living. So there are a lot of residents over there, but I don't see a safe place for them to cross in this neighborhood from here to there.
I'm not sure if
Okay.
it's the neighborhood that you're talking about, but either way. Um,
Canongate, Bob,
Canoncase across the street.
no, yeah, it is. That's what I'm saying. That's what we're talking about.
I'm,
No, if you go by the parcel, I believe you go down and there's a couple of businesses. There's a
And a
there's an
couple of
auto
houses.
body and stuff like that. And then it goes down to a dead end where there is another building, but amongst here there are two streets with houses on it.
Yeah.
So, and my thought is this isn't a parcel for DW Highway, right? It's for, is it Mass?
Herrick
Herrick
Street.
Street.
Yeah, Herrick, is that it?
Yeah.
So
Herrick Street.
Herrick, which leads down that way. So my thoughts were a sidewalk down that way. I wasn't thinking Danny Webster
I
Highway.
see what you mean, yeah.
So
Yeah.
next time I'll explain myself better.
No, you
it's
did.
okay.
You did
No, you're
fine.
all right.
There's
Stay with it.
a couple of houses down
Yeah,
there,
there are
but
a
there's
couple.
certainly not a bunch.
Yeah.
There's not 5.
I would say I drove down there today and I saw numerous, I would say at least a dozen, if not more.
Google Maps didn't pick it up on their satellite picture the last time through. It doesn't matter. Further discussion by the board. Viewpoints one way or another on sidewalks or no sidewalks or whatever. Support them where they would be on DW or Herrick Street or otherwise.
Different subject. I have a question.
Well, let me ask one more sidewalk question. Tim, are we deciding that it's not necessary, or do we decide that they need a waiver for it?
there is no requirement for a waiver. It's a board discretionary item.
Okay, thank you. Nelson, what's your other
Okay,
question?
one of your plans says that this is a service station. And normally in your mind, you think of a gasoline station. And it brings to mind, do you have stored gasoline on this
No.
site or anything like that? So you,
No, when I say service, it's strictly automobile maintenance.
Yeah.
And it was targeted.
Yeah, that would be
He
typical,
targeted BMW.
as would be typical with an auto dealer having a service component.
yes, yes.
And there are no floor drains. That was made clear to us from the get-go.
Okay. Good. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone else have comments or questions? Did we already do the public hearing? Are there any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in on this application?
I don't think you did one.
no, we don't.
Can you give him some space at the table so he can come up again? Mr. Galt?
Harris Drive was created.
Let me make you pause, and I know you introduced yourself earlier, but this is a separate agenda item. So start with an introduction, and then
Philip Gault, Gault, Meeting House Road. Originally, Harris Road was constructed,
Herrick Road.
Harris, yeah.
This is
Not
not,
Harris.
this is not Harris.
It's Herrick with a K.
Oh, Herrick, yeah.
Different
okay,
road.
Yeah, because I was thinking downtown,
No,
down in Harris, Herrick, okay. Well, that's why, if I saw some words up on the screen, I could definitely relate to that. David Sklar had Natural Wood Products down there. And before that glass company came up from Nashua, that was the new right-of-way that was put in when they decided to widen the highway for Anheuser-Busch. So my conception of it is those other businesses down there, maybe the state should use a better approach and use an eminent domain approach to get these businesses to clean up their sites, because who knows how much contamination is down there, and create something that's more feasible than another broken down gas station that's got to contribute more. You know, I love the Grease Monkeys. You know, they're good people. But maybe, you know, you're still getting a little bit close to the river and the wetlands and the aquafilter. And with that understanding, if you want to approve it, that's good. But I think, you know, it used to be a canoe company down there years ago. And they were very good canoe makers, Merrimack Canoe. And along with David Sklar and his shoe brushes that he made for many, many years, because I remember him being down on Lock Street in Nashua when he got that property, and he created jobs. I actually worked for him for quite a few years. And it was quite a dipping room, you know, if you could inhale all those nice chemicals, you know, like shellac and paint thinners and things like that during the winter. And they had a spray room where, yeah, they would spray and the fans would get clogged up with all this mess, and out into the air it went, because there's no EPA regulations, just like Merrimack Plating with the big EPA cleanup down there. I think that the state should definitely step in and create something that's going to prosper many people, not just the town of Merrimack. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
Thank you, Mr. Galt. Appreciate your comments.
Yeah.
Are there any other abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Board members, any final discussion or potential final action on the application? If there's no discussion, does anybody wish to make a motion? Nelson, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead. I will make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve this plan as submitted with the conditions as proposed by the staff.
I just have to remind you, we have to do findings because of the new state law.
Oh, thank you for that, Mr. Thompson. Let me see here.
Top of page 3.
Based on the information available to date, the staff recommends that the board make a finding that with the waiver of full site plan
It
review
should
and
not be the
proposed.
waiver. I'm sorry, Robert has a typo. That should just be with the waivers granted and the proposed conditions of approval.
Okay. with the-
What Tim said.
Yeah, what Tim said was granted. And the application meets all applicable regulatory requirements necessary and to grant conditional final approval to the application with the precedent conditions outlined in the memo of Robert Best on October 27th. I'm sorry, it's from Robert Price to Robert.
Okay,
We'll get there.
thank you. We got there close
I'll
enough.
second.
And Lynn seconds it. Further discussion? Then all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0 to grant that motion. Okay. You're welcome. We are up to item 6 on our agenda, which is discussion and possible action regarding other items of concern. Tim, the need to make findings on our motions is front of mind. And I was going to suggest that although you guys have the recommendation with the words in there, can you just add proposed motion and then spell out what the motion should say, and then someone could say, I move that we adopt the proposed motion in the staff memo?
If that's the direction you'd like us to take, we can certainly start
I
doing
would
that.
Probably
Love
ought to
it.
read,
Yeah.
I would love that.
we probably ought to read it because to get it in the record, I get it.
It's in the record because it's in the memo, and you just
Yeah.
drew it into the motion. But anyway, even if we read it after it's written for us,
We have difficult.
at least we've got it
Some of
spelled
us.
out as what the proposed motion is, and if we disagree with it or we want to add conditions to it, we always can do that, but at least write out a proposed motion for us if you would like. I would appreciate that. Does anybody else have any discussion items or items of concern?
Today.
If there are none, then we are up to the approval of the minutes of October 18th, 2022. What's the will of the board? Pull up my minutes because I'm electronic today. I'm actually trying out my skills to be able to deal with all these things electronically.
I have a couple of suggestions before we make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
On the minutes, then please
On the
make,
minutes.
please make your suggestions.
Page 7, line 34. There's a definite distinction between the two. Chairman Best commented on how stark the site looks. I think that should be stark. The site looks.
Which one are you on?
Okay,
Line four?
I'm on page 7 of 12,
Okay.
and I'm on line 34 on that page.
Okay.
I think you're correct, Nelson.
Yeah. Thank you. And then I have some question on page 9. It calls item 10D, which is line 16. It says the applicant shall delete the following notes from the plan as they are not applicable. And it doesn't say what they are. It says we want to delete note 16 regarding site lighting. It says we want to delete note 29 regarding the project being subject to 167 of the Merrimack Town Code. And if we want to delete number F on line 37, the applicant shall verify that any proposed improvements that have carried over from the previous site plan to this plan have been completed, and if so, remove them from this plan. For example, existing floodlight labeled as to be required.
So your printout seems to have blurred two things together. The notes that are being removed are D Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then that's it. And then E, F, G, H are other
Different comments,
comments
different
from the
conditions.
staff.
Okay, well, I have, just to go backwards for a minute, D, Roman numeral, little Roman numerals, I.
Yeah.
It
Well-
says,
1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
5, 6. Do you have
No.
6 of them on yours?
no, I have 3 of them on here. Hmm?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, but I'm talking about this.
He's just focusing on Roman numeral 3. That it doesn't specify what site lighting. There's no more detail. It just says to delete.
Oh, remove the note regarding site lighting.
But then there's no description of what that note was.
There's no need for it. It's
That's what
note
you're
16 is gone.
Yeah, you're deleting it, so whatever it
Doesn't
said.
matter.
That was the condition the board put on the plan.
Okay, they put it on the previous plan.
This, if you recall, this was the RH Cars project. This was
Yes.
the plan
Yes.
that was previously approved.
Yep.
They resubmitted the same plans, even though they didn't make the changes to reflect what had been properly constructed on the site. So there was all kinds of notes and information that weren't germane to the project that you were reviewing, which is why so much needed to be removed from the plan.
I guess my question on the lighting was, did we delete that lighting? There was some
Not the
bad-
lighting,
no.
the note.
Deleted the note.
Just the note.
Okay, so,
That's the condition on that you guys granted, was that they had to remove that note because it wasn't applicable to that project. It was applicable to the first project.
but it still applies to the site.
There was no new lighting proposed as part of the new site, so there was no need for a lighting note on that site because it exists now.
Yeah, okay, I didn't I guess I didn't appreciate that at the time. There was a bad light on that site, used to shine right into the street. And I remember it from the first time around. I don't remember us even discussing it when this site plan came to us.
We certainly didn't discuss it last meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know that the light continues to exist or it wasn't fixed.
I don't
mean,
know for
we've
sure.
seen this site
Yeah, he
5
walked up
times over
with
the
his
years.
phone, and we saw it live.
What's that?
The lighting was.
He
on
actually had the
live.
lighting,
It was on phone.
his live camera that he
Yeah.
showed you.
He has lighting, but I'm talking about the bad light that Nelson's talking about that shines into the
But
road.
regardless of what's there, we're not discussing that here. We're talking about the minutes.
And the
Well,
minutes reflect what we actually
This
voted on,
is,
which is
this
the notice
section of the minutes is a printout of the notice of decision the planning board issued for that project.
Yeah.
So, no offense, you can't change that part.
Okay, well, I wish we had an opportunity to fix it if it's broken, and I don't know if
That
it's
was
broken.
at the last meeting.
During the
Understand.
hearing, that was the time for that.
Okay, that's the end of my comments, Mr. Chairman. I've been
Thank you, Nelson. Anybody else have comments? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes of October 18th as amended?
I would so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining?
I didn't
Well,
even watch this one,
abstention.
so.
5-0-1 with Lynn abstaining on the minutes. There is no other business before the board. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I will so move.
Is there a second?
second.
2 seconds. All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Thank you all for the work. We are adjourned, and I will not see you in your next meeting. I'll see you the one after that.
What happens next? Another trip to the south?
I know, far, far west.